Brenda Sue Davidson was last seen in Woodbridge, Virginia, on March 4th, 1974. At the time, she lived with her parents and 4 younger siblings. According to her mother, Brenda had stolen $100 from her father's wallet before leaving for school that day. However, she never returned home from school and has never been heard from again. On the afternoon of her disappearance, an employee at the local Greyhound bus station reported that a young girl purchased a bus ticket, but the witness could not remember whether the girl was Brenda, whether she boarded the bus, or where the bus was headed. Brenda had reportedly talked about wanting to run away to Florida, and 2 girls from her class had run away around the same time. However, when the 2 girls were found and brought home, Brenda was not with them. Brenda's younger sister, Lisa, who was 7 years old in 1974, describes their father as an alcoholic who physically abused his children and may have assaulted Brenda. Lisa also revealed that their mother had told conflicting stories about the circumstances of Brenda's disappearance, and she believes that it's possible Brenda did not run away, suggesting that their parents might have known more about her disappearance than they have admitted. Lisa's 2 older sisters, who were close to Brenda's age, recall very little about the time Brenda disappeared. Lisa noted that after Brenda went missing, the family never spoke of her again, and their parents did not keep any of Brenda's belongings. Brenda's father died in 1985, and her mother passed away in 2015. While it is possible that Brenda ran away, it would be highly unusual for a runaway to remain missing for so many years without resurfacing or making contact with loved ones. Despite this, Lisa continues to hope for answers regarding what happened to her sister. Allison Dalton was last seen at approximately 7:45 a.m. on July 27, 1998, at her mother's second-floor apartment in the 100 block of Charles Street in Strasburg, Virginia. She was with her mother, Silena Jo Dalton, at the time. A photograph of Silena is posted with the case summary. At 2:25 p.m. that same day, one of Silena's co-workers arrived at the apartment and found Silena's lifeless body on a couch inside the residence. She had been stabbed 5 times in the chest. Allison was missing, and several of her baby bottles were also gone. Authorities believe Allison was likely abducted by the person or persons responsible for Silena's murder. Investigators believe Silena was killed between 9:15 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. on the morning of July 27, 1998. Neighbors reported they did not hear any screams or disturbances that morning, although one neighbor did state that they saw a man putting a baby in a truck, which led authorities to further investigate this lead. The murder weapon was taken from the scene, and no trace of it has ever been found. At the time of the murder, Silena was in the process of seeking child support from her sometime boyfriend, Daniel E. Pompel. Silena had requested that Pompel take a DNA test to determine whether he was the father of Allison. Pompel later told police that he had been at Silena's apartment around 9 a.m. that morning, shortly before the murder. According to Pompel, he knocked on the door, but no one answered, and so he left. In the year 2000, Silena's mother filed a lawsuit against Pompel, seeking $1.5 million in damages for Silena's wrongful death. However, this suit was dismissed for lack of evidence, and Pompel has never been charged with any criminal offense related to either Silena's death or Allison's disappearance, although law enforcement officers did search his home after the murder. Pompel has cooperated with the investigation throughout. Despite these efforts, Allison's whereabouts remain unknown, and Selena's homicide remains unsolved to this day. Ariana Davis was last seen after leaving the J Express Mart on 9 Mile Road, which was just 3 blocks from her home in eastern Henrico, Virginia, at 1:30 p.m. on April 30th, 2010. She had purchased a Black & Mild cigar at the store and walked out, heading toward Coke Avenue, which would take her back to her home on 3rd Street. She appeared to be acting normally at the time and seemed happy, but she left behind her wallet, keys, and identification at home, and has never been heard from again. At the time of her disappearance, Davis lived with her parents and would usually notify them if she was going to be away for more than an hour, making her sudden disappearance all the more unusual. She was enrolled in a massage therapy program at Fortis College and was only 6 weeks away from graduating. Davis didn't have a car and would typically take the bus to school, so her disappearance was out of character, especially considering the fact that there has been no activity on her cell phone since she went missing. The man Davis was last seen with, Tijuan Holland, is now serving a 60-year prison sentence for stabbing another woman and stealing her vehicle, and he is considered a suspect in Davis's case. It was extremely unusual for Davis to leave without informing anyone, as she had never spent the night away from home before her disappearance. Investigators believe foul play was involved in her case, and it remains unsolved to this day. Bethany Decker disappeared on January 29, 2011, from Virginia, and has never been seen since. These kinds of cases, where there is no discovery of a body or any clear leads, are particularly important to raise awareness for, because someone, somewhere, might know something they don't even realize could help solve the case. At the time of her disappearance, Bethany was just 21 years old and 5 months pregnant. She had been missing since 2011, and as of now, would be 29 years old, and her child, had they been born, would be around 8 years old. Bethany was born in Hawaii as Bethany Little Jordan, but was raised in Fredericksburg, Virginia, by her mother. Bethany was a bright, determined, and hard-working individual who excelled in school. She attended George Mason University, where she studied global and economic change and worked full-time while managing her studies. During her freshman year, she met a man named Emil Decker, who would eventually become her husband. They dated throughout college, and after Bethany became pregnant, they married when she was 3 months along. 6 months later, their son, Kay, was born. By the age of 20, Bethany had taken on a lot of responsibility. She was attending university, working full-time, and adjusting to the life of a young mother. Emil, who was an Army National Guardsman, was often away for training, leaving Bethany to care for their son on her own. It seems that the pressures of balancing her responsibilities became overwhelming for Bethany, and during times when Emil was away for training, she would send their son to stay with her mother for extended periods. While Bethany did not provide an official reason for this, it was likely because she found it difficult to juggle school, work, and motherhood. During one of these periods, While Emil was away, Bethany became lonely and met a man named Ronald Roldan while working at a restaurant. Emil discovered text messages on Bethany's phone between her and Ronald, which led to a confrontation. Bethany admitted that it was just harmless flirting and that she had been feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about her marriage. The two had an open conversation and, according to Emil, worked through their issues. Emil left for Afghanistan, and Bethany continued to balance her life as a student and mother. However, during his deployment, Bethany's relationship with Ronald grew into a full-blown affair, which led to further complications. As their relationship developed, Bethany moved into a new apartment in Ashburn, Virginia, and gave her mother full custody of their son, Kai, as she felt it would be better for him to live with her mother while she continued to work and study. While it's easy to criticize Bethany's decisions from an outside perspective, it's important to understand that she was just 20 years old, juggling a lot, and probably trying to do what she thought was best for her child in the long run. As time went on, Bethany's communication with Emil began to decline, and she eventually stopped responding to his calls and messages. She later confessed to him that she had been seeing someone else, and also told him that she was pregnant with Ronald's child. Emil, devastated by this revelation, returned home to the U.S. in January 2011, and the two had a complicated conversation about their relationship. Despite the tension, they decided to go on a trip to Hawaii together to visit Bethany's father. Emil noticed that Bethany was overwhelmed and confused, caught between her loyalty to him and the reality of her situation with Ronald. They returned from Hawaii on January 28th, and Bethany made plans to spend time with her grandmother the following day. When Bethany arrived at her grandmother's house, she seemed distracted and out of sorts. Her grandmother noticed that Bethany seemed genuinely scared and lost, possibly even fearful of something. Bethany struggled to express what was troubling her, and when her grandmother asked her what she wanted in life, Bethany couldn't give an answer. This moment was an important one, as it was clear that Bethany was in emotional turmoil. Despite the poor choices Bethany had made, it's important to remember that she was very young, and the situation she was in was a lot for anyone to handle, let alone someone so young. That evening, the family had dinner together, and as they were enjoying pizza, Bethany suddenly stood up, grabbed her phone and keys, and said she needed to leave. This would be the last time her grandmother would see her. Emil, who had been staying nearby, went outside to check on her and offered to drive her home, but Bethany insisted on leaving alone. That was the last time anyone would hear from Bethany. For a few days after, there was no sign of her. Bethany didn't visit her son, and she didn't answer her phone. This was not entirely unusual for Bethany, as she was known to disappear for short periods of time. When she got caught up with schoolwork and work, her friends and family didn't think much of it at first, assuming she would reach out when she was ready. However, Emil, who was returning to Afghanistan on February 2nd, began to get concerned when Bethany failed to show up at the airport as they had agreed. This was highly out of character for Bethany, and Emil, feeling worried, contacted her family to let them know he couldn't get a hold of her. Despite the growing concern, Emil had to leave for Afghanistan, and the uncertainty surrounding Bethany's whereabouts remained. Bethany Decker's case remains one of the most unsettling disappearances, primarily because no body was found, and there have been very few leads that could definitively solve the mystery of her fate. For weeks, nothing seemed to be amiss. Then, on February 19th, 2011, her family realized something was very wrong when her friends, including her ex-roommate Sarah, raised the alarm. Sarah had been active on Facebook Messenger one day when she noticed Bethany's name pop up, seemingly active online. Curious, she messaged Bethany, but what followed seemed increasingly odd. As Sarah continued the conversation, she felt something was off. She could sense that the person replying was not really Bethany. It wasn't the usual tone or pattern of replies she'd expect from her friend. Concerned, Sarah decided to reach out to Bethany's grandmother, Evelyn, to tell her that something was wrong. Evelyn immediately drove to Bethany's apartment in Ashburn, Virginia. When they arrived, they noticed something peculiar. Bethany's car was parked strangely, almost as if it had been hastily parked. A thin layer of dust covered the vehicle, suggesting it hadn't been driven in a while. Alarm bells began to ring, and when they entered the apartment, Bethany was nowhere to be found. That's when they decided to call the police, but it was already 21 days after Bethany had last been seen. The police launched into action and quickly realized the gravity of the situation. Bethany had been absent from work, school, and her mobile phone hadn't been used in weeks. Her cards hadn't been touched, and it was clear that something unusual had happened. Their focus immediately turned to Bethany's complicated personal life, particularly her relationships with two men, her estranged husband, Emil, who was stationed in Afghanistan at the time, and her boyfriend, Ronald Roldan. Ronald had been involved with Bethany in an affair, and his connection to her disappearance would soon come into sharper focus. Emil was immediately considered a person of interest. However, given that he was thousands of miles away in Afghanistan, contact with him was difficult. The authorities managed to get in touch with him through the army, and after some communication, Emil agreed to return to the U.S. for a formal interview. Meanwhile, the investigation also focused on Ronald, who claimed that the last time he saw Bethany was the morning of January 29th, 2011. He said she was getting ready for work, but she never came back. Ronald's behavior was suspicious. He wasn't worried about her absence and had even moved out of the apartment they had shared, back into his mother's house. What was even more troubling was Ronald's abusive nature, which was well documented by Bethany's friends and family. He had been controlling, often demanding that she report her whereabouts at all times, even insisting that she send him selfies to prove where she was and who she was with. Friends of Bethany expressed that she was terrified of Ronald. This controlling behavior raised even more red flags when Ronald seemed indifferent to Bethany's sudden disappearance. As the investigation deepened, the authorities uncovered disturbing aspects of Ronald's past. He had a criminal record, albeit not a violent one, but it included crimes such as identity theft and destruction of property. There were reports of him smashing a woman's car window in the past. Ronald's tendency to fly into rages, along with his possessiveness, painted a picture of a man who could be dangerous. Additionally, his behavior during the time after Bethany's disappearance was inconsistent with someone who had truly loved or cared for her. The police conducted extensive searches, focusing on the area surrounding Bethany's apartment. They even searched fields near Ashburn, Virginia, but found no evidence. They eventually obtained a search warrant for Ronald's current residence and confiscated several items from the home. 2 BlackBerry phones, 3 additional phones, a MacBook, photos, tickets, gas station receipts, and immigration documents, since Ronald was originally from Bolivia. They were particularly interested in the technology, hoping to find something that might explain the strange behavior on Bethany's Facebook that night. But as the investigation continued, Ronald stopped cooperating with the authorities. He hired an attorney, and soon after so did Emil, which further complicated the situation. Despite months of searching, including a nationwide search to find Bethany or confirm her identity through hospitals, nothing was found. No one reported seeing Bethany, and the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. Interestingly, the police couldn't rule out foul play, but there was no concrete evidence to indicate that harm had come to Bethany. There were no clear suspects, and the case remained open, but increasingly cold. As time passed, theories began to emerge. Some speculated that Bethany might have run away, overwhelmed by the pressures of her life, school, work, a complicated love triangle, and being a young mother. But many found this theory hard to believe. Bethany's family said she would never have left without saying goodbye, especially to her young son, Kai. They believed she would never have abandoned him, and there was no reason for her to have disappeared voluntarily. Then, a chilling new twist to Ronald's story surfaced. In 2014, he was arrested for the attempted murder of his girlfriend, Vicky Willoughby. She had endured months of physical abuse at his hands, and in a desperate bid to escape, she shot him in self-defense. Ronald, enraged by the attempt on his life, wrestled the gun away from her and shot her in the face 3 times. Miraculously, she survived the attack. This violent incident raised even more questions about Ronald's possible involvement in Bethany's disappearance. Ronald was convicted of attempted murder and received a prison sentence of 6 to 8 years. Once his sentence is served, he will be deported to Bolivia. As for Bethany, her fate remains unresolved. Some believe she might have been a victim of Ronald's violent outbursts, while others suggest that she might have run away in the face of overwhelming pressure. But with no body, no concrete evidence, and no definitive answers, Bethany's case remains one of the most haunting unsolved disappearances in recent memory. Given Ronald's violent history and abusive behavior, many believe that he played a crucial role in her disappearance. While it's impossible to know for certain, the details surrounding Ronald's actions and his disturbing tendencies paint a picture of someone who might have been capable of much darker deeds. Until there is a breakthrough in the investigation, Bethany Decker's family and friends are left searching for answers and hoping for justice as they continue to seek the truth behind her disappearance. Jonathan Dorey was last seen on March 2nd, 2010, in Richmond, Virginia. Originally from Guernsey, an island in the English Channel, Jonathan had come to the United States as part of an exchange program. He was studying geography at the University of the West of England and was staying at the Gladding Residence Center at Virginia Commonwealth University. On that fateful day, Jonathan was spotted walking away from the dormitory at 11:19 a.m., carrying his black mountain bicycle. After this, he was never heard from again. Jonathan's cellular phone was turned off soon after his disappearance, and he didn't take his passport with him, making it unlikely that he left the United States. Jonathan was an avid and accomplished mountain biker, with a particular fondness for the Belle Isle area near downtown Richmond, where he enjoyed riding. his bike, a black Azonic steelhead frame with distinctive features including a black SDG Bel Air seat with a red stripe, raceface lock-on grips, DMR V8 pedals, and Kenda tires, disappeared along with him. 3 weeks after Jonathan vanished, his navy blue Eastpak backpack, some of his clothing, and his shoes were found near the James River in the Shockoe Bottom area of Richmond, close to Dock and Pear Streets. These belongings were located in an area known for its proximity to the river, where the city meets the water. A witness later came forward, stating they saw a man matching Jonathan's description swimming in the James River on the afternoon of March 2nd. At the time, the weather had been particularly harsh, with rain mixed with snow. Authorities launched an extensive search of the river, hoping to find more clues or locate Jonathan. Despite their efforts, nothing was discovered in the water. A body was eventually found in the James River in May, but it was later identified as that of an elderly man, unrelated to Jonathan's case. After the discovery of his belongings near the river, Jonathan's parents came to a heartbreaking conclusion. They believed that their son had been struggling with depression, something they had never fully realized. Jonathan had always been reserved about his emotions, and they had no indication that he was unhappy before his disappearance. Based on the available evidence, they feared that Jonathan took his own life, possibly by drowning in the James River. While Jonathan's parents do not expect his body to be recovered, his disappearance is still under investigation. The authorities continue to look into the case, though no new significant clues have emerged. Jonathan's case remains unsolved, and his family is left with the painful uncertainty of what exactly happened to him on that day in March. The Virginia Commonwealth University Police Department is leading the investigation, and anyone with information is urged to contact them at 804-828-6409. Jonathan's case remains an open and ongoing mystery, and though the family has come to their own conclusions, the hope remains that more answers will eventually surface. Christopher Douthat was last seen on October 25th, 2013. That day, his mother had driven him to his roofing job in the morning. After finishing work early, Christopher received a ride to a Kroger grocery store in Vinton, Virginia, where he cashed his paycheck at approximately 3:30 p.m. Later, a friend dropped him off at Chap's Tavern, located on the 800 block of Campbell Avenue in Roanoke, Virginia, around 4:30 p.m. Christopher was supposed to meet a female friend at the parking lot of the nearby Food Lion grocery store at 5 p.m. But when his friend arrived, he was not there. Other patrons at Chap's Tavern reported seeing him stay at the bar until around 8 p.m. that evening, at which point he left on foot. He has not been seen since. It wasn't until almost 2 weeks later that Christopher was reported missing. Following his disappearance, there has been no activity on his bank account, further deepening the mystery of his whereabouts. 9 months prior to his disappearance, in February 2013, Christopher and his live-in girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time, were victims of a violent assault. An acquaintance, along with his brother, broke into their home on Kingston Road. Both Christopher and his girlfriend sustained cuts and bruises in the attack. Christopher later testified at the trial of one of the assailants, who was convicted. The trial for the second defendant had not yet taken place when Christopher disappeared. The second suspect was later also convicted for his role in the assault. While authorities do not believe Christopher's disappearance is linked to the earlier crime, they do consider it suspicious in nature. Christopher had a somewhat troubled past, including several prior arrests. His personal life had been tumultuous, as his infant son tragically passed away in August 2013, just 2 months before he vanished. His son had a surviving twin sister, and Christopher had been in the middle of a custody battle with the child's mother. The mother had recently taken out an order of protection against Christopher, and he had a court hearing scheduled for 3 days after his disappearance. Despite these challenges, Christopher's mother does not believe that his personal issues would have led him to abandon his family. She described him as a man who enjoyed hunting, fishing, and working on cars. He had a deep affection for his baby daughter and was devoted to his family. His disappearance remains a mystery, and authorities continue to investigate the case. Christopher Douthat's case is still unsolved, and his family is left searching for answers. Anyone with information is urged to contact the authorities. Kelly Berg Dove was born on August 30th, 1961, to parents Fred and Rachel. At the age of 15, Kelly became pregnant and later married Dale Duff. The couple settled in Bridgewater, Virginia, and their daughter Tammy was born in December 1977. Life appeared to be going well for Kelly, and those who knew her described her as a happy young woman who adored her marriage and loved being a mother. By the time she was 20, Kelly had plans to attend community college to give her daughter a better future. Kelly was known for her vibrant personality and her ability to speak her mind, with a scrappy side when needed. To make some extra money, Kelly worked at the Imperial gas station, located on South Main Street, Route 11, in Harrisonburg, Virginia. The station was in an isolated area, a mile south of James Madison University. Kelly's 3 sisters also worked at the station, and on the night of June 18th, 1982, Kelly wasn't scheduled for the night shift, but had traded shifts with one of her sisters. The gas station was busy that Thursday evening, but Kelly found time to call and chat with her mother. Unfortunately, this would be the last call Kelly made that night. Around midnight, Kelly made a quick phone call to the Harrisonburg Police Department to report a man driving a silver Ford who had been harassing her. She explained she was working alone and asked if the police could keep an eye on her, as harassment and obscene calls were unfortunately common at the station when women worked alone at night. However, that night things were different, and it wouldn't be long before Kelly called the police again. She described the man who had entered the station earlier as dressed empathetically, and she suspected that he might have been the same person who had destroyed the parking lot right before she called the police. She seemed anxious and asked the authorities to have someone keep an eye out for her. A few hours later, at 2:30 a.m., Kelly called the police a 3rd time. She sounded frightened and explained that the man had returned, using a payphone outside the gas station to make obscene comments. She said he was driving a silver or gray vehicle, possibly a Ford, and again begged for help, urging the police to hurry. There was a shuffling noise, and then the call abruptly ended. Police claimed they arrived at the gas station just 2 minutes after the call ended, but when they arrived, the station was empty. Kelly's purse and a magazine she had been reading were left on the counter, and a cigarette was burned out in the ashtray. There were no signs of a robbery, struggle, or any clues to Kelly's whereabouts. Investigators began canvassing the area and spoke to someone working at a nearby convenience store. The witness recalled seeing a man driving a gray car stop at the store about half an hour before Kelly disappeared. The witness described the man as being 20 to 25 years old, with shoulder-length blonde hair. However, it has never been confirmed whether this sighting was related to Kelly's disappearance. Authorities speculated that it would have taken as little as 15 seconds for someone to abduct Kelly forcibly into a vehicle and drive off. Kelly's family believes that whoever took her must have been armed, as she was the type of person who would have fought back if given the chance. There have been questions raised about how the police handled the scene initially, with claims that they never closed the store following Kelly's disappearance or took any fingerprints. Doubts also surfaced about the police's claim that they arrived at the scene within 2 minutes of the call ending. After Kelly's disappearance, the obscene calls to the station ceased almost entirely. In fact, in the 6 weeks following her abduction, the station received only one similar call. Kelly's parents have their own theories about what happened and believe a man she went to high school with was responsible for her disappearance. While this individual has never been named, he had a history of indecent exposure and making obscene telephone calls. However, he has never been charged in connection with Kelly's disappearance. Investigators did not share this belief, instead suggesting that it was likely a crime of opportunity, committed when someone noticed a woman working alone at an isolated gas station at night. One potential suspect named in connection with Kelly's case is Glenn Barker, a man convicted of the 1982 murder of 12-year-old Katie Wolski. Wolski had disappeared from the home of a friend during the summer of 1982, and Barker was the last adult to see her alive. The police later found Wolski's underpants in Barker's drawer. Barker was convicted and served 9 years of an 18-year sentence for the crime, but Wolski's body was never recovered. News reports at the time claimed that Barker, who sometimes drove a Ford, had been seen painting his car shortly after Kelly's disappearance. However, Barker has always maintained that he was ruled out as a suspect in Kelly's case because he had been at a family reunion at the time of the abduction, with several relatives able to verify his alibi. One of Kelly's friends even traveled to Charlottesville every day during Barker's 1993 trial to ensure that he was not involved in her disappearance. In 2020, nearly 40 years later, the case was reopened, with detectives re-examining old reports and evidence in the hopes of finding new leads. Old evidence was retested, and the Harrisonburg Police Department began collaborating with Virginia State Police cold case analysts, using modern investigative methods to revisit the case. Detectives have been able to narrow down the list of potential suspects, but time is running out. The detective leading the investigation has stated that it is now a race against time, with some of the people they need to speak with no longer being around and evidence potentially degrading as time passes. Kelly was declared legally dead in 1989, and the gas station where she worked has since been torn down. Despite the passage of time, the case remains unsolved, and Kelly's family continues to search for answers.
William David Dudley lived in a trailer on Martinsburg Pike in Winchester, Virginia, in 1993. The trailer was located on property owned by his girlfriend Cindy Benner's grandmother, who lived in the main house with Cindy and their young daughter. On the evening of October 31st, 1993, Cindy received a call from Dudley at approximately 9:30 p.m. He had been drinking and was known to become easily angered when intoxicated. Despite Cindy's request for him not to walk down to the house, Dudley ignored her plea and arrived at her door shortly afterward. Upon arriving, Dudley reassured Cindy that he was calm before she opened the door to let him inside. However, once inside, Dudley became angry and hit Cindy in the face, fracturing her nose. The noise from the altercation woke Cindy's grandmother, as well as their daughter. On the property were Cindy's relatives, Roger Benner Jr. and his friend Glenn Kearns, who were staying in a nearby mobile home. They overheard the disturbance and, having been drinking with Dudley earlier in the day, went to the house to intervene. Roger and Kearns fought with Dudley outside the house, and during the confrontation, Kearns struck Dudley with a baseball bat. After the altercation, the two men left the area, and Dudley appeared to calm down, apologizing to Cindy. He even attempted to wipe the blood off her face as Cindy's mother arrived at the residence. Dudley and Cindy's mother did not get along, and Dudley, in a stumbling manner, returned to his trailer shortly thereafter. He has not been heard from since. Although Dudley had left the area for short periods in the past, he always contacted his mother afterward, which made his sudden disappearance even more concerning. Several days after Halloween, Cindy checked Dudley's trailer and noticed that his wallet, keys, and other belongings were left on his table. She grew increasingly worried and called his mother, who initially believed Dudley would return home once he had calmed down from the previous argument. However, after 2 weeks without hearing from him, Dudley's mother became seriously concerned for his safety. She and Cindy began searching for him, visiting several bars along northbound U.S. Route 11, from the Virginia state line to Martinsburg, West Virginia, and putting up missing person posters in the area. Dudley's mother officially reported him missing on December 5th. Investigators interviewed Cindy, Roger, and Kearns about the altercation on Halloween night. Kearns admitted to hitting Dudley with the bat, but both Kearns and Roger maintained that they did not see Dudley again after the incident, and their accounts were consistent with Cindy's version of events. Investigators believe that Dudley may have met with foul play on the night of his disappearance, but due to a lack of evidence, no arrests have been made. Dudley's loved ones acknowledged that he struggled with alcohol problems in the early 1990s, but they also described him as a kind person and a hard worker when sober. Dudley was born in Alexandria, Virginia, and his family later relocated to Woodbridge, Virginia. In 1976, Dudley lived in Spartanburg, South Carolina, with his late father and stepmother. He married in 1979 and had 3 children with his wife, though they separated in 1985. After the separation, Dudley began dating Cindy. He and his ex-wife divorced in the early 1990s but remained friends. In 1993, Dudley worked as an automobile body repairman at a used car business in Clearbrook. His remains have never been located, and his case remains unsolved. Bellamy Gamboa, a 39-year-old mother of 4, was last seen in Virginia Beach, Virginia, on the evening of July 1, 2018, between 8:30 and 10 o'clock p.m. When she failed to show up for work in Norfolk the next day, her loved ones reported her missing. That same day, her gold 2005 Ford Focus was found abandoned near a dumpster on Pickering Street, about 4 miles from her home. Inside the vehicle, her purse, wallet, and identification were located, but her keys were notably missing. The scene raised immediate concern. Blood and vomit were present on the driver's side door, and the driver's seat was pushed back farther than someone of Gamboa's height would typically require. At the time of her disappearance, Gamboa lived in a townhouse near Diamond Springs Road with her ex-boyfriend, Lamont Johnson, their twin toddlers, and her 2 teenage children from a previous relationship. Their history was marked by domestic turbulence, including incidents in 2017 where both Gamboa and Johnson had sought emergency protective orders against each other following physical altercations. On July 28, 2018, nearly a month after Gamboa vanished, Johnson was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in her case. Johnson later confessed to shoving Gamboa down a flight of stairs during an argument and then strangling her after she threatened to have him jailed. He described feeling relief following her death and admitted to using his work computer and phone to search for dumpster locations and garbage routes. Johnson told authorities he had wrapped Gamboa's body in a black comforter and garbage bags, disposing of it in a dumpster behind a Dollar General and Pizza Hut in Chesapeake, Virginia. Investigators believe her remains were transported to the Hampton landfill, where authorities conducted an extensive but ultimately fruitless search, costing over $50,000 before it was called off in early August. In May 2022, Johnson faced trial for Gamboa's murder. He was convicted of second-degree murder and 2 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor, with the jury recommending a prison sentence of 25 years and 6 months. Gamboa, who spent much of her childhood in Japan where her father served as a Navy sailor, had built a life in Virginia Beach after leaving the military in 2000. She was known as a devoted and active mother, deeply involved in her children's lives, and was attending Tidewater Community College with aspirations of becoming a licensed customs broker. Although Johnson's conviction brought some justice, Gamboa's body has never been found, and foul play is firmly suspected in her disappearance. Thomas Lee Deusterhouse was a teacher of English and creative writing at Bishop Dennis J. O'Connell High School, a private Catholic high school in Arlington, Virginia, at the time of his disappearance. Deusterhouse had been teaching there since 1999. Just before he vanished, he learned that his teaching contract would not be renewed for the next year, which upset him greatly. However, the reasons for his termination have not been publicly disclosed, leaving many to wonder if this played a role in his disappearance. On the afternoon of his disappearance, Deusterhouse left work and went to his home in the 1600 block of Carlin Lane in McLean, Virginia. He lived in a religious, communal setting with other Catholic men, known as the Youth Apostles, and was involved with their ministry. After arriving home, Deusterhouse, visibly distraught, left his residence later that day and never returned. His whereabouts from that moment remained a mystery. Later, it was discovered that Deusterhouse had traveled to Virginia Beach, Virginia. He was a lay minister with the Youth Apostles in addition to being a teacher, and he was scheduled to begin a 4-day religious retreat with 20 other individuals in Virginia Beach on June 20th. An eyewitness reported seeing him swimming in the ocean on June 18th, which turned out to be the last confirmed sighting of him. Just 12 hours later, Deusterhouse's travel bag was discovered abandoned on the beach. Some of his personal belongings were inside the bag, but notably his keys, credit cards, and his car, a blue 1999 Buick LeSabre with the Virginia license plate number XMT 8126, were missing. The other members of the retreat group, who were waiting for Deusterhouse to join them, canceled the retreat when he failed to arrive, as he was a no-show for the event. Nearly 6 weeks after Deusterhouse went missing, in late July, his car was found in a commercial parking garage near the Rosslyn Metro Station in Arlington, Virginia. Investigators determined that the car had been parked there since June 17th, and it was confirmed that Deusterhouse had parked it himself. However, the car did not actually belong to Deusterhouse. It was registered to the Youth Apostles, a religious organization with which he was affiliated. Deusterhouse was the 6th of 8 children in his family and had never been married. He was known for his deeply religious Catholic faith, attending Mass daily. He had graduated from Bishop O'Connell High School in 1991, then went on to earn a degree in English education from the College of William and Mary in 1995. Later, he obtained a master's degree in English from George Mason University in 2008. In 2010, Deusterhouse even self-published a novel titled The Loyal Treatment. Throughout his life, Deusterhouse had taken lifetime vows of chastity, obedience, and poverty. He was known to donate most of the money he earned from teaching to various causes and ministries, and he dedicated much of his time to working with others in his religious community. Dusterhouse's father has expressed concern that his son might have become so upset about his job termination that he decided to walk away from his life. Authorities, however, have continued to investigate the case, believing Dusterhouse may still be in the Virginia Beach area. It is known that Dusterhouse had previously frequented parks and shelters, where he ministered to homeless youth. Since his disappearance, his cellular phone and credit cards have not been used, and there have been no reliable sightings of him. Though there is a possibility that Dusterhouse drowned after being seen swimming in the ocean, investigators have noted that if this were the case, his body should have washed ashore quickly. Despite the fact that it appears Dusterhouse may have left on his own accord, his family, friends, former students, and law enforcement are all concerned for his well-being and have continued to search for answers. His case remains unsolved, and authorities are still trying to piece together the events surrounding his disappearance. Shanisha Ure-Lewis attended the Sunday service at Gethsemane Baptist Church in Newport News, Virginia on July 17, 2022. She was an active member of the church and served as a clerk. After the service, Shanisha was seen by her children having an argument with her husband, Adrian Salvatore Lewis, in their driveway. Despite the tension, they left together in Adrian's 2014 Chevrolet Silverado at 9:34 a.m. 6 minutes later. Surveillance footage from a Little Caesars restaurant showed Adrian in the parking lot, wiping the inside of the passenger door of his vehicle. In the video, only Shanisha's legs were visible, and they were motionless on the passenger seat. According to Shanisha's sister, Deidre Ure, Shanisha and Adrian had been experiencing marital problems for several months prior to her disappearance. Adrian had repeatedly accused Shanisha of infidelity, though she denied these accusations. Multiple witnesses reported that Adrian had threatened to kill Shanisha several times. He had confided in a close friend, admitting to being unfaithful himself, and when the friend pointed out the contradiction, Adrian allegedly responded, "I'm from the street, and I handle things the street way." On July 5th, Shanisha informed Adrian that she wanted a divorce, leaving him confused and upset. On July 14th, Adrian made another threat, which led Shanisha to remove the family's guns from their home and take them, along with their 2 children, to Deidre's home for safekeeping. Later on July 17th, Shanisha and Adrian visited Deidre's home at 1:30 a.m. to pick up their children. At 9:40 a.m., Adrian called Deidre and accused Shanisha of having an affair. Then, around noon, Adrian called again, claiming that he and Shanisha had gotten into a verbal altercation and that she had jumped out of his truck near a Wawa gas station on Jefferson Avenue and Harpersville Road. However, surveillance cameras in the area did not support his version of events. After this second call, Deidre repeatedly attempted to reach Shanisha, but only received text from Shanisha's phone. Deidre never spoke directly with her sister, and investigators believe that the phone was being controlled by Adrian at the time. Shanisha had previously told a friend that her husband had cloned her phone, meaning he had copied her data and identity onto another device. At 3:45 p.m., Deidre was driving to Shanisha and Adrian's home when she noticed Adrian's truck parked next to a dumpster in a parking lot on Jefferson Avenue. She stopped to investigate and saw Adrian placing several items into the dumpster. Police later recovered these items, which included a dirty shovel, Shanisha's brown purse, her sandals, some of Adrian and Shanisha's personal documents, and a blanket with a suspected handprint on it. In the aftermath of Shanisha's disappearance, Adrian had his truck detailed and even purchased a plane ticket to Montego Bay, Jamaica, planning to leave the day after Shanisha went missing. However, he was detained by police at 4:15 a.m. on July 18th at Washington Dulles International Airport, just before he was set to board his flight. Shanisha's passport and credit cards were found in his luggage. Prior to his arrest, Adrian had also researched whether Jamaica had an extradition treaty with the United States, suggesting he was preparing to flee the country. When police searched Adrian's truck, they discovered a significant amount of blood in the passenger seat, despite the truck having recently been professionally cleaned. Adrian claimed that the blood belonged to his dog, which, according to him, had been shot by a neighbor. However, both of Adrian's dogs were healthy, and no one had reported shooting them. DNA testing confirmed that the blood was Shanish's. Additionally, a bullet casing was found in the truck, and further investigation revealed that Adrian had searched online for information about gunshot wounds to the head and the penalties for murder in Virginia. He also reportedly called a friend and said, "It's over. She admitted to cheating on me," and asked a friend to look after his children, as he was planning to go to Mexico. The friend did not believe Adrian's story. Investigators were never able to locate Shanish's phone, and despite her typically making up to 106 calls a day in the weeks prior to her disappearance, there was no activity on her phone after July 17th. Adrian was charged with first-degree murder and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony in Shanish's disappearance. In September 2023, after only 1 hour of deliberation, the jury convicted Adrian of first-degree murder but acquitted him of the firearm charge, as the cause of Shanish's death could not be determined without her body. In January 2024, Adrian was sentenced to life in prison. He was also ordered to have no contact with his children until their 18th birthdays and prohibited from making any uninvited contact with them thereafter. Shanisha had been married to Adrian for approximately 17 years at the time of her disappearance, and she was the mother of 2 teenage sons. Foul play is strongly suspected in her case due to the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. And although Adrian has been convicted, Shanish's body has never been found. Claudine Gifford was last seen leaving the Pelican Bar, a tiki bar in the 40 block of Windjammer Lane at Windmill Point Marina in Whitestone, Virginia, on the evening of July 6, 2014, between 6:30 and 8:30 p.m. At the time, she was with James Todd Kessler, commonly known by his middle name, her boyfriend of about 2 months. Kessler, separated from his wife and undergoing a divorce, had been in a casual relationship with Gifford, who was herself estranged from her husband and had moved to Virginia in 2013, leaving her teenage daughter with her ex-husband in Florida. Witnesses reported that although Gifford only had a few drinks that night, she was visibly intoxicated to the point where Kessler had to carry her out of the bar and into his Nissan Xterra. According to Kessler, while driving her home, she became angry because she wanted to continue drinking, and after less than a mile, she tried to jump out of the vehicle. Kessler claimed he stopped and let her out, after which she walked away. Later, he added a conflicting account, stating that 4 men had helped her into a silver Nissan SUV after she exited his car. When Gifford was reported missing the next day, her loved ones immediately suspected foul play, as Kessler appeared unconcerned about her disappearance despite their close relationship. Friends later described their relationship as troubled, noting Kessler's heavy drinking, cocaine addiction, and controlling behavior. When Gifford visited her family in Florida, Kessler incessantly called her and even contacted her estranged husband to pressure her to return to Virginia. After her disappearance, Kessler claimed Gifford had sent him a message stating she was moving to North Carolina, instructing him to pack her clothes into a suitcase and leave it on his porch, which he said was later picked up. A friend of Gifford's received a text from her phone saying she had messed up but had found a job in South Carolina. Just minutes later, Kessler called the same friend, speculating that Gifford had run off to South Carolina with a businessman. This raised suspicions, as her friends doubted the messages came from Gifford and suspected Kessler's involvement. Gifford, who had no permanent address in Virginia, was staying with friends and at hotels. She was a private person, described as quiet but dependable. Though depressed about her dog's recent death and missing her daughter, she had been seeing a counselor and making plans to return to Florida and establish a home for herself and her child. Investigators quickly turned their attention to Kessler after observing inconsistencies in his statements. Witnesses noted Kessler had visible injuries, including a badly bruised forearm and other wounds, which he attributed to unrelated accidents. However, a search of his vehicle revealed Gifford's blood on the front passenger seat and door. Inside his home, authorities found additional blood evidence and a red shirt Kessler initially admitted to wearing the night Gifford disappeared. After the bloodstains were pointed out, he backtracked, claiming he had worn a different shirt. Lab tests later confirmed the blood belonged to Gifford. Authorities pieced together a grim theory based on the evidence. They believed Kessler, who had been drinking and using cocaine that night, fatally beat and strangled Gifford after she revealed plans to leave him. Investigators theorized that he placed her body in a green and blue cloth wardrobe suitcase, weighted it with chunks of concrete, and disposed of it in a nearby waterway. Cell phone records showed Gifford's phone remained near Kessler's family home on the night of her disappearance, contradicting his story that he left her near the marina. The following day, her phone was inactive for several hours while Kessler's moved between his home and a nearby family cabin with access to a dock and a small boat. Witnesses reported seeing Kessler power washing the dock and observing crumbled concrete blocks at the site. Despite the mounting circumstantial evidence, Kessler maintained his innocence, claiming he loved Gifford and hoped to marry her. At trial, he argued that she might have left voluntarily and changed her identity, and witnesses were presented who purportedly saw Gifford after her disappearance. The defense argued the case against him was purely speculative, as there was no hard evidence proving Gifford's death or the location of her body. However, the prosecution produced damning evidence, including a photo taken at the bar that night showing Kessler wearing the blood-stained red shirt. In August 2015, following a brief 3-hour deliberation, the jury convicted Kessler of second-degree murder. The prosecution had previously offered him a plea deal, 20 years in exchange for revealing the location of Gifford's body, but Kessler refused. He was sentenced to 40 years for murder, nearly double the state's maximum sentencing recommendation, and an additional 5 years for concealing a body. Foul play remains suspected in Gifford's disappearance, and her body has never been found.